Welcome to Her Drive, the podcast where we spotlight women walking the unmarked path to purpose, prosperity, and soulful impact. I'm your host, Cynthia Kremplet, intimacy coach, energy healer, and curious spirit who has the honor to connect with so many beautiful women and share their messages, stories with you all. Today's guest brings a refreshingly rooted approach to leadership and abundance. Jennifer Whitaker is a slow living coach for ambitious women, business strategist, and feminine wisdom keeper who helps women scale their businesses by aligning with the natural rhythms of the earth. With over 20 years of experience growing companies to $30 million and deep training in divine feminine practices, Jennifer merges timeless wisdom with modern strategy to create success that's sustainable, cyclical, and sacred. Hey, Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having me. What a beautiful, warm welcome. So happy to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. I am over the moon excited to dive into your personal and professional story and what you care to share with us, and then also dive into the way in which you approach femininity and the working life and business strategies in this modern era. So it's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess first, just getting to know you a little bit, do you mind sharing kind of the genesis of whatever your story is and kind of walk us through how you've kind of moved through life, maybe had some transformations that really impacted you and led you into the work you're doing?
Absolutely. I would start with saying that the natural world has always been central to who I am and really how I serve and what I do as far as guiding my mission. Over 20 years, I served as a philanthropy executive and I worked alongside leaders like Dr. Jane Goodall. And as you mentioned, also scaling businesses to over $30 million, many of them being animal welfare and environmentally based, and just raising hundreds of millions of dollars for these incredible causes. And on the outside, it looked like I had it all. I had been featured on the front page of the New York Times. I had a beautiful home, this beautiful impact. But over time, particularly in the quiet moments, sitting under a tree or looking out at the Pacific Ocean, I lived in Seattle for a while, I felt my intuition guiding me to a more spiritual path. And then there was just this one day that I really couldn't ignore the intuitive nudge any longer. And so I went on to study the divine feminine for 3 years. I became a certified spiritual director and coach. And within 6 months of completing my studies, I started my business and had my first 100K month, which sounds amazing. And I am so grateful for it. But it was rooted in hustle and the old patterns of hustling in my executive career was really starting to creep back in. I was working 12-hour days. I was answering client messages in the evenings and the weekends. And that's when I realized I really need a framework that can not just magnetize wealth. Clearly, I knew how to do that. I knew how to scale businesses, but I didn't know how to do that sustainably. And when I looked around, I really couldn't find any business programs that were designed specifically for women. And I found myself at an equine spiritual retreat, and I was standing outside in this horse corral, and I was deep in meditation. My eyes were closed, and Buddy the horse came up to me while I was deep in meditation, and I sensed him say, "You are me, and I am you." And that's when I remembered, wait a minute, I am nature. And if I am nature, why am I not building my life and my business in alignment with nature?
Mm.
And all of a sudden, my entire methodology, my earth flow methodology, was downloaded in that moment. And my business and my life have never been the same since. And essentially, what happened in that download was the clear framework of aligning business and life with the seasons, with the wheel of the year. So, my earth flow methodology It is very much grounded in the seasonal cycles and in nature's wisdom and in intuitive leadership. Because when we are aligned with nature, when we pause and slow down, we're able to reconnect with the wisdom that's already within us that can lead us to our easiest, most sustainable next step to our most abundant life.
Wow. Just want to pause for that amazing story. And obviously, you have a very connected spirit and intuition that's potent, and the audacity to listen to yourself.
That's it. It's not just about slowing down and listening. There has to be action to this. So oftentimes we're either really embodied in our masculine energy where we're doing, or we're really embodied in our feminine energy where we're receiving and receiving and listening and listening. But the two need to be working harmoniously together. So there is a space, especially that's why I love the framework of working with the seasons, because we have seasons of action, but we also have seasons of rest where we can receive that intuitive guidance.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully feel you. In the last several years, I've been leaning into seasonal components, especially after studying Ayurveda and realizing the significance of honoring the seasons, not just from a festival or festivities type of way, or what are the holidays right now, or how our clothing might change, but actually rooting down into, like you said, we are nature, and we're not listening. Potentially some of us are, but listening to the rhythms of our own bodies. So how can we really attune other aspects of our life, such as our business, to that, if we and our bodies are not syncing and understanding. And let's be honest, especially in the States, we live in such a massive economy where we have access to so much, and we can fly around and basically have any type of season at any type of year. So in knowing that, what are some ways that you recommend for ambitious women to allow for that ease and understanding and reconnection with themselves and in the natural rhythms of the cyclical, the seasons? Hmm.
Yeah, I'd say it starts with just the understanding of how
Mm.
it works. And I use the Celtic wheel of the year because Celtic tradition is from my lineage, but you'll see a lot of indigenous traditions following a similar framework. So the Celtic wheel of the year is this ancient calendar based on the natural rhythms and energy of the seasons. And when you imagine a circle, almost like a pie divided into 8 slices, each slice represents a seasonal shift in energy. And each one has its own invitation for a different type of energy. So you're probably familiar with the solstices and the equinoxes, and there's also midpoints in between them. And for thousands of years, women lived and worked in harmony with these rhythms. They knew that there were times to rest and to produce, and there were times to plant and to harvest, and everything had its season. But over time, we moved away from this living when the Gregorian calendar was adopted. And that shifted us from this nature based feminine framework into a more patriarchal, productivity driven one that's very linear. And we lost something so sacred. So our calendar became linear and not cyclical. And it stopped honoring the Earth's rhythms. And this in turn disconnected us from our intuition
Mm.
and the ease in creating abundance. And I believe this is too, like we're starting to, as a result of that, we started to force things out of season.
Mhm.
And when we think about businesses, particularly, like we hear a lot about starting the new year strong and coming out of the gate with these big, bold, audacious New Year's goals. But when we look at nature, nature's quiet, it's
Mhm.
hibernating, it's resting. And so we're forcing our bodies and energy to do something that are unnatural. And as a result, we're seeing these crisis levels of burnout, and it's making us sick, and it's disconnecting us from our joy and our intuition and our magic. It's affecting our relationships. And the way to begin to bring ourselves back into alignment is just by simply starting to look at what is the season outside of me mirroring, what is the wisdom that it has within, that it has within itself, and what is it trying to teach me. And so just becoming an observer, I'd
Mm.
say, is the first start, the first step to doing this, regardless of where you live. I had a woman recently who lives in Ecuador, and she's like, "Can I follow this? Because we don't have these really well-defined seasons where I
Mm,
live." And I said, "Well, you have probably rainy and dry seasons, and the shifts in energy might be a little bit more subtle, but it's always constantly changing. So just start to observe what's happening around you and taking note of that. And then taking note also of how your body is affected by those changes. And over a period of time, it'll start to really feel embodied. Like, okay, no, I know my body is more tired in the winter, or it might be summer for you, but just noticing what those shifts are and then taking one small shift within your work to align towards the energy of your body in the season. That would just be the first step that I would do. Awareness, and then what's one step that you can do to bring your work into alignment with that season.
yeah, that makes such perfect sense and is a clear directive. And I'm curious if you could walk us through the different phases of the seasons. I know you said you follow the Celtic calendar, which is eight. So maybe we can go through all eight, or maybe just the typical seasons that we know about, or the average person, and how that might relate to business, and how someone could shift. We'll say like the winter phase of business will be slow, quiet. Maybe there's some uncertainty there. Yeah. So curious what that might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the simplest way is to define it in the four seasons that we have. And in winter, where we see nature hibernating and resting, that is the time for us to rest as well. It's also the time to reflect on the previous year. What worked well? What didn't work well? And really giving yourself some spaciousness too for the creative ideas to download, not to start to put them into action, but just to start to allow yourself to receive all the ideas, whether they're offers or programs or a new podcast, whatever it is. What are the creative ideas that want to bubble up from you? In the winter is the time to give yourself that spaciousness to do this. And I want to also underscore too, it's not that we're only going to be resting in the winter. Each season, we're turning the dial up on a particular energy, but we're still going to always be resting throughout each of the seasons. Like in the summertime, we're going to be selling more predominantly, but you're probably always going to be selling a little bit in each season. You're just turning the dial up on it each for each season. When we shift into spring, that's the time that actually I guide my clients to create their strategies and their annual plans in February. Where I live, February is a time that you start to see those little sprouts starting to come up from the soil from hibernating in the winter. And so that's the time to really start to look to the future. How am I going to implement the creative ideas that I downloaded in the winter? This is a time to create. It's the time to build. It's the time to prepare your launches. And so we move through those pieces in March and May. And then in the summertime, this is the time when you think about summer, this is like we're in full blossom. This is when we want to be visible. We want to show up. We want to sell. We want to collaborate. We want to be on the podcast. We want to be standing on the stages. That's the time to really be working with that energy. So it's not like you're forcing yourself to be visible. Your energy naturally wants to be a bit more embodied in that energy to show up and sell. And then when we move into autumn, this is the time that we typically harvest. So you'll probably see the fruits of your labor from all of the work that you did in the spring and the summer. And that's the time to harvest it, to reinvest it into investment accounts or into your business again. It's also the time to refine, to look at what's working, what's not, perhaps some elements of your business that you've outgrown over the year that you want to release. And it's also the time to automate and delegate. So if there's aspects of your business that are pulling you out of your zone of genius or could actually be automated so that you're not manually in your business, that's when you want to set that up so that you have the spaciousness as you move back into winter to rest and reflect and be fully present for those creative ideas again.
I see. Thank you for that description. Pardon me for a moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, women, we are also cyclical in nature. Um, Many of us before we go through menopause, right? So, how would a woman be both cyclical through the year and then also honor business and those strategies and cycles within the month? Is there a way to do so?
Absolutely. The seasonal energies are also mirrored in lunar energies in the month. So when you look at summer, which would be the full moon, that's when you're also looking at times to show up and sell and be more visible. And you work through the moon and the lunar cycle very similarly as the seasons. Now, whether you are a woman who is menstruating or not, your body is still connected to the cycles of the moon and is feeding off of the energy of the moon. So you can still honor that if you choose to. So it's the same model and the same principle on a more condensed scale each month.
That makes perfect sense. And as far as scaling and finding um, dramatic, how do I say this? Making shifts into natural rhythms. How have you seen within, I think you kind of described it already within your life, but maybe there's greater examples, but also within people that you've worked with, what are some like dramatic, I mean this in a positive way, um, shifts that have happened for women who have found their way into syncing with nature?
Absolutely. I had a client who was new to my world, and she and I had just started working together. And she came to me, it was towards the end of the year. So we're looking at like November, December. And she was planning on launching a program at that time, and everything was already set up. So she had already set all of it up coming before coming to me. And she's like, I have all my ducks in a row, everything's ready. And my body is telling me, I just don't want to do it. I'm tired. I'm depleted. It's the end of the year. I feel like I should do it because I have everything set up, but my body is just telling me no. And so we worked in like slowing down and really listening to the wisdom of her body. And over a couple of days, she's like, I really think I want to lean into this wisdom and pause the launch. And as we created space for her to have more spaciousness, to rest and reflect and really honor the season that she was in, and she had paused the launch. Somebody that wasn't even on her radar reached out to her and hired her. And she had her largest month that month, the week that she actually paused her launch and slowed down. And so that was able to sustain her through the winter months more than she needed. And then when she did do the launch in spring in alignment with the seasons, she sold it out before she even went public with it. So, again, just through these simple shifts in energy, it all just fell into place.
Yeah. Is there a way that women can start to identify where they're forcing growth instead of flowing with it?
That's a really great question. And I would say, again, the wisdom is in our bodies. If something is feeling heavy, if it is feeling restrictive, and if you are feeling so disconnected from your body that you don't even know if it's heavy or restrictive, if there's a part of you that's like, I just don't want to do it, that's a sign that there's something that's out of alignment. And so bring curiosity to it rather than forcing yourself and saying, I should do this, or I've already invested so much time or energy in this. Like, if I pull this now, my income is going to drop. It's going to affect my business. All of these are limiting beliefs. They all come from this patriarchal society that tells us that value is equated to external productivity. When we see that nature and our bodies give us plenty of evidence that when we have the spaciousness, when we slow down, we actually reconnect with our magnetism. We reconnect with our intuition, which guides us to the easiest and the simplest next step for abundance. So it's by that simple spaciousness and getting curious around the limiting beliefs that might come up as to why you can't pursue something that feels a little bit lighter or easier. But bringing curiosity to that is definitely a first step that I would guide women towards.
I really love that, Jennifer. I find that when I'm curious, that doesn't have there's no space for judgment. 'Cause I'm
Right.
just exploring. And even with my own choices, I'm like, oh, okay, there's no self-judgment either. And if there's no judgment, then there's more expansiveness to allow for other blessings to flow through, especially in this case with if you're choosing to go with the awareness that our wonderful, intelligent bodies are speaking to us.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't say like oftentimes when we think that we're out of alignment, that there's something wrong with us. And so we seek these external solutions of like, what's the strategy that I need to do to fix this? Or what's wrong with me? And if you're feeling out of alignment right now, I want you to know that it isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's actually your inner wisdom speaking very clearly that there is something that is misaligned, and it's just simply information. It's your body and your intuition telling you that you've drifted from your natural rhythm. And so it's just a simple course correction versus, like you said, it's not this judgment. We don't need to be judging it. It's actually like honoring and thanking our bodies for this information that it's giving us.
Yes, yes, absolutely. The last several years, gosh, 3, 4 years now, I've done a lot of work around becoming embodied, like really hearing my body. For many years of my life, disassociation was something I did in order to survive. And I think so many of us can relate to that. Like you're living in your heads or you leave your body and it's almost like a numbness that's there where you can't hear the signals, or if the body is speaking, you just kind of ignore it. And I feel really grateful to now can feel aspects of my body when something's a yes, when something's a no, or if my body needs something. There's a relationship between like this beautiful temple that's been selected and my spirituality and my consciousness. They all work in tandem. And things really do. And I'm speaking to you, Jennifer, but also to everyone who's listening. There is a great deal of magic and flow and ease now that I can listen to my body. So I really encourage you all to find that curiosity and explore what the body is saying if you can hear it. It's something so spectacular, and I feel even more in my feminine now. And in that femininity, I feel limitless. I feel powerful. I feel like very self-loving, and it feels like a magnet for all these beautiful things in my dreamscape that I'd hoped for, and now they're starting to come manifest. And
Mm.
and with that, I'm kind of curious, Jennifer, what you think about if abundance, or even we'll say financial abundance, do you think that there is like a seasonal intelligence around it? Like I've noticed throughout my life with my business and just other aspects, sometimes there's like, it seems like very specific times of year, a lot of abundance comes through, and then other times it's kind of sleepy. And have you noticed a pattern in that way at all?
Yes, and I think the season where there are flows and there are ebbs differ for each person,
Mhm.
but I think what we need to remember is that it's normal and that is the natural evolution of how nature works. And the society that we live in has led us to believe that it has to be always flowing
Mhm.
instead of, and we judge the ebb. We think that there's something wrong with the ebb, but it's in the ebb that we go inward and we reconnect with our power and we trust the dark, we trust the divine, we trust ourselves to be able to produce more abundance. We may, in that ebb and in that pause, realize, you know what, there's an aspect of my work that I've kind of outgrown. And without that pause, we would not have really brought our attention to that. And so we shift our work to align more authentically with who we are. There are so many gifts that come from the ebb. And again, we're taught to fear the ebb. Um, we fear that when we have an ebb, we're going to be stuck in that season forever. And again, that's why I love seasonal alignment so much, is because seasons teach us that this too shall pass. We're not going to be stuck there forever, and that there's a gift in it all. And so when we can honor that gift, we trust the unknown so much more beautifully and powerfully. And then each season becomes a portal to our greater growth and presence and our magnetism as well.
Wow. I really love that. And I am deeply wondering if there's a way for women to lean into their femininity without losing that, like, some of the positive, I'll say the positive sides of the masculine, right? Which is like that structure, strategy, perhaps, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like some feel like if they soften, they might lose their edge. They may not be successful if they, especially if they're in a male dominated type of industry.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's such a common fear. I think the way that we will end up thriving alongside our success is by shifting from an outward in versus an in outward. And what I mean by that is, like, right now we're looking at external things to um, validate our success. So we look to the strategy, we look to a boss's approval, we look to followers, we look to all these things to determine our next moves versus looking to our intuition to guide our next steps. When we do it from the logic into the intuition, or completely shutting off our intuition, that's when we end up burning out and depleting ourselves. And that's actually when we end up actually taking a longer path to our abundance. And it might be a more difficult path. That's where we might encounter more challenges or struggles, or it works against our energy. But when we tune into our intuition first and then let it guide us to our next step, so we're still taking action, but it's being guided by a greater wisdom that knows our simplest and easiest and most abundant next step. So, the first step I would guide women to is really relearning how to listen to your intuition, particularly if you're in a male dominated framework or job, or you just embody more masculine energy. And I had to do this myself after 20 years being an executive. Is I had to relearn how to listen to my intuition. And I started with really simple things, things that had really low stakes. So it would be, what does my intuition want to guide me to eat this morning? Is it a green smoothie or is it oatmeal? Which way on my walk do I want to turn? And ask my intuition, is it left or is it right? And just practicing with that, because you can't get it wrong, but it allows you to tune into how your body speaks to you with your intuition. It gives you really signs and clues as to what it feels like when it's a yes or when it's a no. And then you can raise the stakes a little bit more and more and a little bit more and a little bit more until it becomes embodied and second nature.
Amazing. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I call it following my bliss bubble.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Um, I'm curious, in a day in your life, what does seasonal alignment look like? I guess we're in the spring right now as we're recording this, so perhaps we can talk about what's happening right now for you.
Absolutely. So I start every day with a spiritual practice, and that spiritual practice is connected to nature. So right now, my practice is going out in nature, going for a walk, and we are in the season of creativity and visibility. So I also start my day with doing some creative writing outside and just letting whatever wants to come up. And then I boldly share it. Some of those posts, some of the things that come up in those intimate journaling sessions are vulnerable, but I lean into the energy of being visible and allowing my truth to be heard and seen by others. I'm also, like today, I am doing podcasting a bit more, and really just getting in front of other people's communities and sharing this important work with others. And so leaning into the energy of May that way as well. Right now in May, we're also in the energy of magnetism. And so, how can I embody my most magnetic self? And I ask myself that question actually at the end of the day. I do a journaling prompt right before I go to bed. And I say, what needs to shift internally and externally so that I can embody my most magnetic self? And I imagine all of my spirit guides, the universe, all of the spiritual team working on my behalf while I sleep so that it's not just about me trying to become my most magnetic self, but that the spiritual world is shifting heaven and earth to help me embody that version of myself. And I promise you, within 24 hours of that prayer or that journaling prompt, something shifts, whether an opportunity comes, I might get a surprising download or aha, or suddenly a subconscious belief that I had never examined will bubble up. Something shifts. And so that has been a practice too that I close my day with.
I think it's so stunning and beautiful. Um, with what's very clear, you have a spiritual practice based on what you said. And I'm curious how long you have been in this connection in this practice. Yeah, I'll start with there.
I'd say I've always been a very deeply spiritual person. It has been evident in my lineage and my family for, oh my goodness, hundreds and hundreds of years. Particularly the women on my mom's side, very clairvoyant, intuitive, really powerful spiritual women. And so that gift has just been passed down to me. So I feel like I've always, almost always had a spiritual practice. The practice itself might shift, but I've always had a consistent spiritual practice.
I love that. And as a woman with spiritual giftings and abilities that didn't realize they were anything special until the last couple of years, I've noticed that there are superpowers in my mind of that I can utilize and turn on in ethical ways to help me better align my life. So for those women who are starting to come online to their gifts and blend them with their business goals, do you have any words of wisdom or yeah tips to do so?
Absolutely. I think spaciousness is the key ingredient to be able to tap into that wisdom, to strengthen it. So, even if you start with 5 minutes a day, just giving yourself space to begin to hear and feel and just sense into what wants to emerge, because everybody has it. Everybody has a gift. Everybody, and particularly, I think women have this intuitive ability that um, I feel like is we lose it in the busyness. I say the best way to disconnect a woman from her power is to keep her too busy to go outside, too busy to have that spaciousness. And really, even science shows us within a millisecond of putting our toes in the grass, our body resets to the frequency of the earth. And that frequency is abundance. And so, just giving yourself 5 minutes is a tremendous amount of time, enough time to really begin to cultivate those gifts that are inside of you and to hear your inner wisdom.
Wow, I love that you referenced how touching the earth can realign us very quickly. And the prayer that I do over my food is always thanking Pachamama, Mother Earth, and thanking her for her what seems like endless supply of abundance. And I believe, we call the Earth is a female being. It's a female.
Mm.
I believe the Earth is a living being in and of itself. I believe each body, like my body, is its own sort of planet of a sorts, with like other little beings living inside of me. Um, but kind of like digressing there. But it is a sense of constant abundance, and I think that the way in which we treat ourselves is directly related to how we treat and see the earth.
Mhm.
And for the women who don't really have an earth based connection or spirituality practice, but are curious, are there certain things that you would recommend where they can start to tap in, tune in? I know we've talked about the seasons, but are there any direct practices that can really bring them into familiarity with 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 the planet that we live on, and which can then open up the flow of abundance in a myriad of channels of which it can come into our human lives?
Absolutely. The earth is rich with different ways to unlock different aspects of your magic and your gifts. And my earth flow methodology um, includes many different practices where you can easily tap into your inner wisdom in even less than 10 minutes. And what we always do is we prime ourselves before we go outside, and we put a hand on our heart and one on our womb and stand outside. If it is in a season where you can put your feet into the grass or the soil, we do that. And we take coherent breaths, meaning 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out of your nose. And that starts to recalibrate your nervous system to the frequency of the earth. And then there are different practices that you can do. There can be some simple breath work, but it's amazing. Each aspect of nature can do different things. There are sun rituals that will unlock your confidence. Sitting by a stream will help you hear your intuition more clearly. Walking through the forest will give you creative downloads. Each thing has its own magic to that. And so I have many different practices that can guide you to unlocking that. But I also have a free resource, and I can make sure that you share this in the show notes as well, which is 7 nature practices that will help you unlock different aspects of what you might be working through, whether it is releasing a limiting belief, whether it is wanting more clarity, whether it is um, wanting clear guidance on a specific question, or magnetizing more abundance. All those things are listed inside this free workbook, alongside how to create your own abundance altar using some natural elements, bringing them indoors as well. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It's super simple, and just starting with a practice that I said of just like putting your hand on your heart and on your womb and having that coherent breath outdoors is a really just great place to start.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. And earlier you'd mentioned sometimes we get so busy, we can't even go outside, right?
Yes.
And I've been very active lately, busy, but all in really high momentum, great things. And just this morning, I was feeling a little grumpy, and I knew in my body, I was like, it's because I haven't touched the earth today.
Yes.
I went outside and I smelled the beautiful pine trees, but I haven't touched her. I haven't like sang to her. I haven't really engaged in a more meaningful way. And then started looking towards my afternoon, which is time carved out to go be in nature with another powerful female. So there are ways to do this, and to pay attention, right? Like if I stare at a screen for too long, I start to get like kind of bitchy and grumpy. Like
That's
my
right.
face turns into a frown, and I'm a very happy person. So I think there's signals for us, like go be outside, like put your phone down.
Absolutely. But it's so simple, and yet it's so hard, right?
Yes,
Like, that's the
exactly.
anomaly in all of this, and that's why I love the seasonal framework, is because I found even when I went back to my hustle habits, what was happening is I had my nature practices. So I was able to drop into them and become magnetic and magnetize well through the practice, but I didn't have the framework to hold me consistently in my daily life, in my weeks, in my months, in the year, to honor that, to guide myself back to, okay, I'm spending too much time on the computer. Now, this framework has a framework for your days so that you have time blocked out to take those breaks, to go put your feet in the grass, to go on a nature walk with your girlfriends, and then also guiding your, not just your daily life or your lifestyle, but also your business. And so it holds you through that so you don't pop in and out, in and out, in and out, because in the world that we live in, it's going to naturally pull us out.
Hmm. Yeah, gosh. Oh, your framework sounds so absolutely magical, and necessary. Like, especially in the planned time blocking of sorts. Like, I need to plan out time to be in my feminine.
Yes, we
Yeah,
do. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. Well, Jennifer, if you could go back in time and give a younger you some words of wisdom, to what age would you travel and what would you say?
Oh, I think I would go back to my 20s. There was a part when I first went to college and I thought I had my whole life planned out. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then there was an unexpected turn. And then all of a sudden, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was so worried about not having the plan, not knowing how everything was going to turn out. And I would go back and say that I am held, it all works out even more beautifully than I can imagine, and that it's safe to let go and allow myself to be held.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel the tingles of that all the way throughout my body. How beautiful.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Jennifer, I'd like to open up the floor for anything you care to share before we close out and tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, I want, if you're listening, just to remember that you have permission to trust that slower means faster. And that when you align with your natural rhythms instead of pushing against them, that you're actually going to accelerate your path to what you truly desire. Your intuition already knows the way to your most abundant life, and that you carry this beautiful intelligence that's designed to thrive. And when you just learn to slow down and align with nature, you're going to unlock that intelligence. And that's the simplest and most powerful way to create the life you desire, and you deserve that. So, the best way to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram. It's I am Jen Whitaker, IamJenWhitaker. I'm also the host of the podcast Rooted Women Rise. And you can also find my seasonal offerings on my website at jenwhitaker.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your beautiful energy with me and all the listeners. It's really been an honor.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to all the beautiful guests for tuning in to this episode of Her Drive. As always, I encourage you to please check out our guest information in the show notes and feel free to share this with anyone whose hearts, heads, body could really hear this beautiful nutrients that was shared with us today. And feel free to leave a comment, leave a review. It takes just a short amount of your time, but it really goes a long way because it helps other people find this particular episode, find the show, and know that it's a valuable spend of their time. Until we meet again, bye everybody. See ya.